And we thank the Alzheimer's Association, as always, for partnering with us on this workshop and everything we brought to the table this year. The Foundation has dedicated a lot of resources this year to raising awareness to dementia and to providing new and expanded resources for area families. The New Dementia Project was sparked initially by a bequest from Hugh and Betty Miller of Rock Falls. Many of you may have known Hugh and Betty. Hugh and Betty owned Hugh Miller Insurance. And Betty had battled dementia for almost 11 years before passing away in 2020. It was Hugh's wish last year, just before his death, that the Foundation would develop a new dementia program to make it easier for families and caregivers to help their loved ones. And so tonight's program is called Money Matters. And I think this is a very fitting title because, of course, we'll talk about some issues related to money. But money does matter. It matters a lot. You know, there's the old expression, family, or God, family, and money. Maybe not always in that order, right? Money matters, especially when you're dealing with the type of resources needed to care for someone in what can be a very long journey through dementia. So I'll open the program tonight and I'll talk broadly about some topics that we're going to get a lot more insight in from a panel of experts that we have to talk to us today. I'm going to briefly introduce them now, but I'll give them more of a proper introduction here shortly. So do me a favor, guys, as I say your name and title, give a little wave and play friendly here with the audience. So we have with us here today Veronica Edwards. Veronica was the main caretaker for her mom, Betty, and she is the owner now of Hugh Miller Insurance Agency in Rock Falls. Veronica is also here with her husband, Mike. Mike is a life and health specialist for the agency. Beth McFalls is a certified public accountant with McFalls, Burge, and Associates in Sterling. Beth? Who else do we got here? Nick LaRue is a financial advisor with Edward Jones Investments. Will Lee is an attorney in private practice in Rock Falls. And Jamie Wong is the founder and CEO and benefits advocate with Golder Care Solutions in Moline. And finally, Susie Perino is a market president with Sauk Valley Bank in Rock Falls. So we've got, bankers, financial advisors, tax professionals, insurance professionals, lawyers. Just missing a dentist and we could have a great party. I'm making fun of us. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. So we're going to talk about some of the costs associated with caregivers. We're going to talk about some practical solutions that you can put into place to, I think, at least put yourself in as best position as possible to succeed, and some pitfalls as it pertains to managing money. But look, we know there are costs. We know there are burdens for you as caregivers, both financial and otherwise. I think some of us might have that attitude that, well, it's not a burden. We're going to roll up our sleeves. We need to do what's going to be done, and that is noble. But we know that it is difficult on caregivers. Financially, the Alzheimer's Association reports that 78% of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs associated with their caregiving. So dipping into their own pocket to take care of things that need to be done. I see a lot of head nods out in the crowd here today. On average, that amounts to more than $11,000 a year. $11,000 a year, which, by the way, is twice the out-of-pocket costs of a caregiver handling, helping someone who has a non-dementia-related chronic condition, okay? So we know that there is a financial burden on you as caregivers. What are some of those things? Well, obviously, there is travel, medications, there are home improvements associated with many times, allowing somebody to remain in their home, cost to get them from point A to point B, medical equipment themselves, and all of this can add up. Additionally, caregivers may work less as they're spending more time with their loved ones. Less time at work means lost wages, of course, and I think that's what comes to our mind first and foremost. But it also means you're less likely to maximize some of those employer benefits as it pertains to your finances. We're talking 401k with company matches, pensions, HSAs, and other employer benefits. Less income, a lot of times, is associated with more debt. More debt is associated with less assets. Not only are you not making a concerted effort to build up more in the way of long-term savings, but many times you're having to dip into the long-term savings that you have built up. Less income, more debt, less assets, all of this ties into a less secure financial future for yourself as a caregiver. So financially, we know there are challenges, but it's not just on the financial side of the equation. When Alzheimer's Association surveyed caregivers, 40% had indicated battling with some form of depression in their period of time in acting as a caregiver. Nearly half reported higher levels of anxiety, statistically significant levels of anxiety. Okay, so some of you may be thinking, well, I wasn't feeling anxious. Sorry about that. I don't mean to say these things to cause anxiety or frighten, but they are a very real part of being a caregiver. And so we want to try and give you some solutions, some things that I think you can do to at least set yourself up for success. Again, this is not going to eliminate the issues. It's not going to eliminate the costs, but it can mitigate some of the issues dealing with the costs. And if anything else, if nothing else rather, it can at least provide you with that timeline, that time frame, or to know where are we at on this journey, okay? I think, and by the way, as we go through these things, I want you to keep in mind, the best time to do them is as early as possible, right? You want to do them now or soon thereafter. The longer you wait, I think some of these things are more challenging to take care of, okay? The first one, which I think personally is the most important, is having a conversation about money. Nobody likes to talk about money. It's stressful. It's very rarely filled with fuzzies, warm fuzzies, and rainbows and unicorns. It's worry. It's anxiety. It's will we have enough? Where is it going to come from? Okay. But again, studies have shown the people who are having conversations about it actually have less stress because it helps create that time frame. Okay. And dementia patients want to have that conversation with you as well. It's just nobody wants to be the first one to take that lead. Okay. So what are some things you can be asking? Remember, if you are acting as their caregiver or power of attorney, they have given you a great deal of confidence. They have a great deal of confidence in you, rather. They're trusting you to execute their wishes. So you're not going to screw it up. You're not going to offend them. They want to know that you have what you need to take care of them throughout the rest of their lifetime. Okay? So what are some of these questions? You can ask them, what does money mean to you? How do you feel about money in general? You'd be very surprised at the different kind of responses that you will get when you ask that question, okay? We all look at things within our own framework, but people perceive things in different ways. What types of things do they spend money on? Who do they want to support? Individuals and institutions. I think sometimes when we talk about money as it pertains to dementia, we're preconditioned to think we're trying to hang on to our money because it might need to be spent. And while that might be true, obviously some folks have more resources than others, and with proper planning, you might very well still be able to do the same sorts of things in terms of charitable contributions or otherwise that the dementia patient had experienced throughout her or his entire lifetime. So as the custodian for their money, I think we want to think about dollars and cents. Where are they? What types of things are they held in? But what is that patient's goals for the money? How do they want to use it in their lifetime and beyond? I think without flipping those pieces of the puzzle over, you're going to have a hard time getting a clear picture. So have the conversation about money. Now, eventually it will get down to dollars and cents, of course. And I think you always want to start with, in my opinion, the costs, especially if you're evaluating more than one avenue of care. Or maybe you're evaluating what it will cost in a facility. Maybe you're evaluating what it's going to cost to have care in your home, or some combination thereof. What are the total expenses that you expect? What are the total outflows you expect in a given period of time? And where do you expect those costs to go long term? There's a lot of chatter about inflation lately, but some things tend to rise more than others over time. Okay, so having an idea of what you are going to need has got to be your first step. We're not just talking about costs as it pertains to care, but costs in general. Okay, so what are the outflows going to be? And then, of course, who's paying for it? So you want to list all of the income sources, the fixed income sources that the person has. So, of course, we're talking about Social Security. We could be talking about pensions. Maybe we're talking about rental income, farm income. Perhaps there is some sort of long-term care benefit that's going to be delivered from an insurance policy. Knowing what those inflows are going to be and how long they're going to last is very important. Some things, like Social Security, you can expect a check as long as the government's still around for your lifetime, right? But others may not be the case. Most pensions, when people take a pension from work, will pay a check throughout their lifetime and some sort of spousal benefit for a survivor. But sometimes those pensions can be selected over a certain period, maybe 10 years. Sometimes they can be selected for even less than that. And maybe that selection has been made years ago, and nobody quite remembers exactly what that's going to be. It'll throw a big wrench into the equation if all of a sudden a pension check just stops coming out of the blue. Okay? So make sure you know not only where the income sources are coming from, but what the duration of those income sources are going to be. Okay? Same for long-term care benefits. Some of the older long-term care plans may pay out a benefit for life, but much more commonly now, there are caps in terms of the lifetime benefit that's available in those plans. So knowing what that is, how much is going to be paid out on a monthly basis, and how long that's going to last is the foundation of your plan on the income side, certainly. Okay. Also, are there any cost of living adjustments on the income? So some pensions will get an annual step up that mirrors Social Security. Some get an annual step up that is fixed independent of Social Security. Some don't get an annual step up at all. Those things are more relevant, again, when you're dealing with caregiving in dementia, because while the average stay in a facility might only be 2 to 3 years in general, for folks with cognitive impairment, it can be much, much longer. Okay? So those cost of living adjustments will make more of a difference long term. Okay, so now if we know what's going out of our pocket, and we match that up with what's coming into our pocket on a fixed basis, there may or may not be a gap between what you have coming into your pocket and what you want to spend. And of course, you're going to be the one to fill in the gap with any assets that you have built up in your lifetime. We'll talk about this quite a bit later with some of our guest panelists, but Medicare and your supplement are not going to be a whole lot of help with chronic conditions, those things longer than 90 days of nature. There are some limited veteran benefits that might be available for long-term care, but again, that's not going to go the entire way in all likelihood. So there is a state-sponsored program we'll talk about later that will pay for your care in a long-term care facility called Medicaid, but as many of you know, Medicaid is for the impoverished. And it's not as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys who deal with financial accounts, it's not as if you're sitting there at your office one day and you get a call from the nursing home, and you pick up the phone and the nursing home representative says, I understand so-and-so has an account there with you. I'm going to be taking all their money now. That's not the way it works. It's just if you want the state to pay for your aid, your care, the first question they're going to ask is if you have anything. The answer to that is no. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. But if the answer to that is no, they're going to say, go away and come back until the answer to that is yes. So you're going to have to know what assets are available. If you're married and you have a spouse who is not needing care, there are protections in terms of joint assets that can be held, and Jamie will talk about that a little bit later, I believe. but knowing what those assets are and what you have available. Where are they and how are they titled is important too. Some of them might be in retirement accounts. Some of them might be in just a bank account. Some of them might be in an annuity or cash in a life insurance policy. All of these things have different ramifications, particularly on how that money is taxed when you pull that money out to spend, okay? And Beth can talk a bit about that here too. So this might seem a bit overwhelming, but if we boil it down, again, you're wanting to know what is my expenses, subtract out my income, what is the gap that I'm going to be responsible for, okay? And then there are plenty of financial software you can use to help you understand how long that money is going to last. But even if you do some back-of-the-napkin math, you could get a pretty good understanding. The reason that's important is because I think, again, it's going to provide you that time frame. You're going to have an idea of how long you would expect to have resources to pay for the care, and that will help you make confident decisions for the dementia patient as their custodian. Okay. Finally, I just want to talk about a few pitfalls to avoid. Will talk about this here shortly, but if you're a caregiver, you first of all need to have had the discussion about making sure you have the legal ability and authority to make these decisions for the dementia patient. It's not as easy as just walking into the bank and saying, I'm the caregiver and I'm here to take care of these issues on behalf of this person. And obviously you guys know that. But having those legal documents in place while the patient is still able to make these decisions and have the capacity to do so is important. It gets muddier if not. Having the conversation about money, again, I just want to stress it one more time. There are many of other things going on that you have to deal with as a caregiver, and so I think it is easy to punt that conversation, kick the can down the road. I would argue that it should be one of the first conversations that you have, so making sure you have that conversation. And then lastly, Susie will talk a little bit about financial abuse, especially as it pertains to folks dealing with dementia. But I do want to highlight it a bit here too. And I don't say this to scare anyone, but we all live in a world where there is a whole group of people who are intent on separating us from our money, and they will do it in any way, shape, or form, okay? And I could go over countless personal anecdotes of stories I've heard pertaining to financial scams. Financial abuse to dementia patients, of course, is not limited to these broad, I won a lottery in Nigeria types of scams. Much of the abuse does happen closer to home, but it is something that as custodian you have to be more and more aware of, I believe, because folks are more susceptible to these types of things the longer their journey with dementia extends. Okay. And while that is not a very bright and sunny way to end this presentation, it is something I wanted to highlight before Susie came up. Okay. So again, to recap, one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, I forgot to give our disclosures here. The things that any of us talk about, especially me, I don't know anything, but what any of us here talk about here today, you should take away from a broad perspective. And what we hope to accomplish is to give you food for thought so that you know what questions to ask of your professional team. But getting advice from your attorney, your financial professional, your tax professional, your insurance specialist is paramount. They are the ones that know you and your situation will be able to give you tailored advice. Please do not sue. Okay. And on that note, I would like to go ahead and invite our panel up to the front. I will introduce them all individually here as we get ready to share some information. Oh, thank you. And actually, one more thing. We said this last time, but it's important. If you have a pen, I'm going to again give you the hotline for the Alzheimer's Association. 1-800-272-3900. The Alzheimer's Association mans that line 24/7, 365. If you don't even know what you're calling for, but you need to talk to someone, they will point you in the right direction. So I'll just read it one more time. 1-800-272-3900. Okay. Everybody got a chair?
We can play music with chairs.
Okay. We'll start, Veronica, with you if that works. Veronica is part owner, CEO, and insurance agent at Hugh F. Miller Insurance Agency in Rock Falls. As a caregiver for her mother, Betty Miller, over 10 years, she saw the hard work, patience, and true love that it takes to care for a loved one through a long-term disease. While transporting to doctor's appointments, preparing medications, and helping with everyday tasks like meals and personal hygiene, she also often carried the mental load of this disease and its effects. Veronica learned what it means to be a caregiver and how to also care for herself at the same time, all while running a successful business. So Veronica, without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Good evening, everyone. My experience with Mom was probably a little bit more unique than some, but the progression started over a period of time. From the time I first noticed that something was a little off, it was probably about 5 years before it got to the point that we knew it was something serious and irreversible. Even mentioning it to the doctors along the way, I was getting the phrase, well, she's old. Well, I knew it was more than just old age. I knew it was more than just the aging process because it wasn't happening to Dad. The journey for me along with that was also a little more unique because not only was I her daughter, but I was her partner in business. I worked with my parents, and at that point I had been working with them for a number of years. I can't even think of what the number would have been at that point, but probably around 20, I'm guessing at that point. But I worked with her and saw her day to day and could see the things happening along the way. So for me, it was equally important for me as a daughter, but also as a business partner to make sure that we had things lined up and I could protect both facets of my relationship. So outside of the care that we were already negotiating or navigating through, the next thing that Dad and I and Mom sat down and talked about was power of attorney. It's super important that we made sure that we had a health power of attorney and a financial power of attorney set up. They're two different things, and just because you have one doesn't mean that the other is going to be the same people. You want to make sure that that decision is really thought out, and you pick someone for both options that is going to advocate for you along the whole journey. And your health care and your financial are two different pictures. And you may have different people that you want that to be. You also want one person who is your primary, but you also have to have a secondary person in line. So Dad and I navigated both those things together, but that was one of our first things that we made sure that we had in line. And in doing it with Mom, we consequently did the same thing for Dad and got things lined up with him. Once those are set up, it's super important to make sure that you share those with your doctors, your physicians, anyone that you're working with. They should have a copy of that on file. I cannot remember the number of times that I went to a doctor appointment and they told me they didn't have it, and they said, you need to check your file. It's in your file. But I also always carried a copy of it with me, just in case that happened. So it's very important to not only have it set up, but have it on file with all the physicians and providers that you're seeking care with, and also to keep a copy. The financial power of attorney, once that's set up, I would encourage you to make sure that your accountant, your attorney obviously should have it because they set it up, but your bank should have that, your insurance professional should have that. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody in there. I think
financial advisors.
Financial advisors. Anyone dealing with your finances should have that on file. There's nothing more frustrating than being at an appointment with someone and not being able to discuss it. And then for them to have the expectation that Mom was going to be able to comprehend it at the point that we were, that was not realistic. So it's very important to make sure that those providers have that, because legally they cannot talk to the person unless they know that you're the power of attorney for that portion of their their well-being. So once that was in place, we needed to review insurance. For us, obviously, that was a little easier than some because we lived it every day, but we reviewed everything that was in place already for Mom, from the Medicare supplement to long-term care or in-home care, if that was the option, and we put together what she was gonna have for care, and how that was gonna benefit us through the journey. Then we also have reviewed all of their life insurance and annuities, not only just to see what they had and to see if those items could be used down the road for care as needed, but also to make sure that beneficiaries were in line and to make sure that we changed the owner. I know that sounds kind of strange, but we changed the owner so Mom couldn't change those policies, so someone else had the oversight on it. Even though the power of attorney was in place, we made someone else the owner of the policy, so Mom couldn't accidentally get mail and cancel something or make changes to it that weren't in her best interest. Because of the business, we obviously had a relationship with our accountant and our attorney prior to setting some of these things up. And that made it a little easier for us, but if you don't have that kind of a thing, I would encourage you to seek counsel right away, because that power of attorney is critical to having set up. Banking was another concern. That was something we wanted to make sure that that had all the things in play. So we met with our bank. It's very important to have someone else on all bank accounts. Susie, I'm sure will talk about this, but you don't want to have something happen where it's only one person on the account and something happens and they cannot access the account. If they don't have another person on the account as a signer, that account's going to be locked up. So that was very important to make sure we had that in place so that we didn't run into those issues within the accounts. Something that happened that we didn't really even anticipate, and it's not necessarily a financial when it deals with the bank or an institution, but mail started to become an issue for us with Mom. We honestly didn't even consider it, but we all get junk mail, but for some reason, Mom and Dad got so much junk mail for just a subscription. Oh, just pay this 3 years and you'll be able to have a subscription to, I don't even know what they all were because there were so many of them. And just donations, solicitations, and not from local places. There's so much mail that she was getting. And she was in charge of their personal finances at home, so she'd open the mail and she'd write a check and she'd put it in the mail before Dad even got home. And so money was going out that really shouldn't have, because she just would write those out. So once we realized that was happening, we actually changed the mailing address for most important paperwork so that it started coming to the office. So I would encourage that to be something that you give thought to, that if there's important papers, it either gets done paperless with email. I know nowadays that's probably more common than when I first started the journey with Mom. Paperless really wasn't something that was on my radar at that point. And you could also set up a P.O. box if you don't have an alternate place to send the mail. But it's very important to make sure that your mail is not being lost. She was to a point where she would open mail, scribble all over it, or sometimes it ended up in the garbage, or like I said, she was mailing checks back to places that really did not need to have her funds. So, and to get away from the money side of it, we also took away the checkbook. She always had a spot in the house that the checkbook was, and we eventually took that and all of the extra checks, because she knew where the extra checks were. Remember that you probably have a box somewhere that those are sitting, and that's probably a dangerous thing if they know that they're there and can access them. So that's something to really keep in mind as well. And out of sight, out of mind. You know, if they don't see it, they're not going to remember that they're there. So I think probably one of the most important things throughout all of those things was we always included mom. We never did this without her present. I always felt that that was very important. I never wanted her to feel less than or to feel like we were trying to hide something, because there were times where she felt that way just because of the nature of the disease, and I never wanted to add to that. So I always felt it was very important to be transparent with her about everything. Did she understand all of it? Probably not. Was there a point where she didn't understand any of it? Probably. But we still included her to make sure that she still felt like she had worth and that she was part of the conversation. So.
Thank you, Veronica. That was great, really. I really like the anecdote about the mail too, because like even me, I mean, it's just mail all the time. So I absolutely can understand that. Mike Edwards is a life and health insurance specialist at Hugh Miller Insurance Agency. He has years of experience working with clients and their families through some of the more difficult times in their lives. He has advised clients through long-term care solutions and choices regarding their life and health insurance for 21 years. He's found his career with his clients to be extremely rewarding, walking them through various insurance needs at any stage of life. With personal experience as a caregiver for his mother-in-law, who, as we just heard from, suffered from dementia for over 10 years, he saw firsthand the demands that dementia requires for a person suffering and their family, and how the right insurance can help ease a family's pain during difficult times. So, Mike.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to get right to the chase. I guess the biggest thing, long-term care insurance. There are many ways to get long-term care insurance, okay? A standard long-term care insurance plan, which probably very few people in here have one, I quote it all the time. I rarely ever sell it, okay? It's expensive. It's between $4,500 and $8,000 a year, okay? If you want to get a benefit for $200 a day, which is the going rate for a non-private nursing home, okay? Not a private room, a shared room. It's about half that for home care, okay? Most long-term care policies do have at-home care in them, at least the ones I write do, okay? That's very important for people today, to be able to stay in their home, okay? The problem with those are, if you have health issues, they're not gonna write it, okay? They're gonna deny you based on your health issues. There are, I call them short-term nursing home policies. They're a year-long benefit rather than 3 or 5 years. They're called hospital indemnity plans. The state of Illinois makes them put a hospital indemnity on it to not have to call them long-term care, because your license is different to sell long-term care. So that's why they do that, but it has a long-term care benefit. You get up to $300 a day for up to 52 weeks with a zero elimination for $1,000 a year, okay? Less medical questions. Luckily, we had a policy like this for Betty. She didn't qualify for the long-term care. She qualified for this. We got to use that policy, you know, for home care for her, okay? And that's up to $1,200 a week in home care. That isn't much, but it gave Hugh a chance to get out of the house, okay? And to get away from the care, because it was dragging him down. It really was. You can also nowadays add long-term care to life insurance. People's biggest complaint about paying $4,000 a year for long-term care is, well, what if I don't use it, right? It's gone, I don't get anything for it. You can add a long-term care rider to a life insurance policy with quite a few carriers now. There's quite a few more that do that. And you can access your death benefit as a long-term care. So you get up to $350,000 of a death benefit towards your long-term care. So if you don't ever go in a nursing home, that money's getting paid out to a beneficiary, okay? So either way, that money's gonna get paid out. It's a great alternative. I put it on a lot of policies on 25-year-olds because it's so inexpensive that I just say, trust me, you'll need it one day, okay? You're gonna ask about it. It's like $50 a year to add this onto the life policy, compared to what the long-term care costs, okay? Because as we already said, Medicare and Medigap policies, Medigap policies, they're not gonna help a lot, okay? They pay if you've been admitted to a hospital for 3 days, okay? Then between the two of them, you have 100 days of long-term care, all right? But that's admitted into hospital for 3 days. It's not under observation. It's not, it's not any other way you're gonna enter a nursing home. It's for recovery care. So, Medicare is just not gonna pay it. Medicare does have some in-home care, but you have to qualify for it. You have to be homebound. Literally, you can't leave your house for physical or, for certain reasons before Medicare will pay anything at all for home care, okay? I touched a little bit on how much long-term care costs. Assisted living is about $4,300 a month, $4,300 a month is what it would cost you for full assisted living. In-home care is about $4,500, okay, a month for that. That's a lot of money. A long-term care policy is at $8,000 or $6,000 sounds like a lot, not when they're paying out $80,000. Okay, if you're in a nursing home or assisted living, you're in home, the cost of them are between $45,000 and $80,000 a year. So when you think about that, it's really not that bad. If you get it in your 50s, which is what that's my target area for that, because normally you're healthy enough to get it. And, if you get it in your 40s, you're not going to use it for 20 years, or 25 years probably, and you're paying a lot of premium in for it. I will also touch a little bit on what she said about the POAs. I can't, a daughter can't call me and get health insurance information. I can't give it to them. I can't tell them what policy they have, whether it's paid, how it's paid. I can't do it. The third person on the checking account, I've had probably 5 or 6 cases this year already where somebody got hacked. They were in a nursing home. I literally had to have somebody pick up the paperwork, take it to them to get it signed, bring it back because that person wasn't on any of the accounts. Okay, had they been on the account, it would have been an easy process. Same thing for a claim. Somebody has a claim. I can't discuss a claim with somebody who either doesn't have the health insurance POA, I just can't do it. Well, not the claim. Claims would be, so again, it's like she said, both of those are important. Both of those need to go to your insurance agent, okay? There's a law called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability Act, that doesn't allow me as an agent to discuss that. Even if I know the person for 20 years, I just can't do it. I'm not gonna lose my license over it. So, that's really all I have. Think to the future. If you have car insurance, you have homeowners insurance in case something happens. Get your long-term care insurance, okay? If you have any assets whatsoever. If you don't have any assets, don't worry about it. Let Medicaid cover it, okay, quite frankly. But if you have assets, and they'll talk about this too, I'm sure, if you have assets that you want to pass along or retirement, 401k, things like that you worked hard for because you want to spend that money in your, in your senior years, then you need long-term care insurance.
Thanks, Mike. And to Mike's point on, go ahead, I'm sorry. I think you start looking at some of those premium numbers for the level of care, and it can seem a bit overwhelming. You might not think it is affordable. I encourage you to look at it. You might not need a policy that covers the full cost of care. But remember, just because you're in a facility doesn't mean your income is going to stop. You might still be receiving the same pension and Social Security and rental income. So you might want to try and price out with somebody like Mike what a policy looks like. You're just trying to fill in that gap, and you might find that makes it a little bit more affordable. Mike, can I ask you, I heard you touch on one thing. Could you, you mentioned an elimination period. I think that's really important for some people to hear. What does that mean, and how does that affect decisions here?
Okay, so elimination period is how long you have to be in a nursing home before it's going to pay that daily benefit. Most long-term care comes in a daily benefit, okay? $150 a day, like he said. the going rate I told you right now is $200 a day. But if you had a policy for 100, and you're only paying 100, right? So it's still worth something. So if you have a 20-day or 30-day elimination, you have to be in a nursing home before they're going to pay anything for that amount of time, okay? Most policies I send out are probably a 90-day elimination, okay? Because the lower that number, the higher the premium. All right, so people have to sit down and think, well, I can afford to pay this much for this long, and then I'd have the long-term care insurance kick in. The short-term ones we talked about, you can get a 0. It's still affordable. It's not much different than a 30-day because they know they're only going to pay a benefit for a year and they're done. All right, another policy that's at a 3-year or 5-year benefit, the average stay in a nursing home right now is 2.5 years. Okay, but that's just in the nursing home. That doesn't include the home care you received before you went to the nursing home, because usually that's the last resort for people. So that elimination period is going to help drive the premium. The longer that period is, the lower the premium, but the more out-of-pocket cost to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Will Lee is an attorney in private practice on First Avenue in Rock Falls. Concentrates on all areas of real estate, estate planning, wills and trusts, business, corporate matters, and probate guardianships. He also serves as the public guardian and public administrator of Whiteside County. He was admitted to the bar in 2009, and he returned to his hometown, Sterling, in 2011, and he has a wonderful purple blazer today, which I really like.
Totally on
Will.
purpose, Sam.
Yes.
Can you hear it? Is this on? Okay. Thank you to the foundation and to Bethel Reform for hosting this. Appreciate it. So I do have personal experience with Alzheimer's and dementia, but I think my professional experience is also informative that being the public guardian, that's not just giving advice to other people who are guardians. I am being their guardian. And so I am dealing with these practical issues as well as advising my private clients on how to deal with this. So I just want to peel back the onion, start basic, so we all can get on the same page and know what to do moving forward. You'll hear some terminology later. You've already heard some of it, but and you'll hear it again. Medical and financial powers of attorney. Those delegate decision-making for while you're alive, but unable to make decisions for yourself. There are different times that they can kick in, it can be customized, but generally that's what it is. Then you have a will, okay? And that controls what happens with your assets after you pass away. That document requires court involvement to have meaning. It does not have any meaning unless you go to court. Okay, that should not be lost. And then you've heard trusts a lot. And a trust can control before and after you pass away. And it has sort of a seamless authority who's in charge of that trust. There's no court involvement necessary to transition from one decision maker, which is typically the person who makes the trust initially, to the secondary successor decision maker who takes over after that initial person passes away. You'll hear me talk about title to assets. That's about who owns an asset and in what form. So you can have co-owners, right? That two people own something, or you can just have one person that owns something. If two people own something, one co-owner dies, does their share go to the other co-owner? Or does it go to someone else? All right, so then we also have beneficiaries. Beneficiaries are who receives the asset after the death of all the co-owners and owners. So if you put your daughter on your checking account so that if you have a hospitalization, someone can pay the ComEd bill, and then you put beneficiaries on there of all your kids, that account goes to that co-owner after you pass away. It does not go to all your kids. So that's a frequent misunderstanding I'll see. You're also going to hear me talk about legal capacity. And that's that you have the ability, the cognitive ability to act for yourself, and that you retain that decision-making authority, which means other people recognize your ability to act for yourself. So you start to run into issues when you go into somewhere and they say, we're not comfortable accepting this signed form from you. That's not a legal declaration of incapacity. Well, that's pretty darn close, right? Because as we've heard, practicality is really important in this process and as the disease progresses. And so when someone won't recognize your signature, and they're your bank or your insurance company or your investment company or your accountant, that's about as big of a stumbling block as a judge's order in the practical administration of your life. So, for estate planning and preparation, the most important question, I think, is how do things sit today? That's a pretty informal way to say it, but how are assets titled right now, and what estate planning documents exist right now? You know, we get into, you can have all complications in your life, right? You can have 37 checking accounts if you want, or you can have one. You can have sub-accounts and investments, or just one. And that really depends. That impacts how easily you can sort of get a handle on what's going on. You'd hear people, usually it's kids making fun of their parents for making up the binder, right? The binder that has all the account numbers in it, what the niece's birthday is, all this other stuff. You know, well, that's really important to have a centralized location, because the way we work is that, you know, we'll, like with an aging parent, you'll get into their life as much as they'll let you. You're trying not to pry, you're trying to respect their privacy. And so then when something happens, you don't know where to go. You start monitoring the mail and you start gathering what you can find, but the binder does help. And that can take a lot of coordination.
Who's got a binder?
Who does the binder? There we go. All former accountants. Is that right? Is that? So who owns what and how are foundational facts to your estate plan. If your foundation is deficient, the house built upon it is worthless. So a lot of work is done with clearing the table in my job and really finding out, oh, okay, all right, this is what we thought it was. Oh, Fred's not on that one. Janie's not on this one, and we kind of figure it out, because for everyone, while things are running clean for those 40 years, it's not relevant. Who owns what? We got a light bill to pay. I don't care if it's from Sauk Valley Bank or from another checking account, okay? The next, I think, topic I want to touch on is how things sit on the day of diagnosis informs what you do next. I think that should trigger, because that can be the start of your planning. It's not the end of your planning. And you need in place clear title to real estate and personal property. Cars have titles, houses have deeds. Your $75,000 Rodin Bronze does not have a title. It doesn't have a deed. So there are things that we have, most we don't know, right? Unless you're watching Antiques Roadshow or you get the Sotheby's auction book for some reason. But the reason we do that is because handling those assets is easier, cleaner, and more inexpensive. You do not have to do any of this, I guess, but it will leave you and those around you with a mess that can be expensive to address. So again, I kind of see this as an act of love to those around you of kind of getting this in order, because none of us know when it's going to be needed. You also absolutely need your powers of attorney for finance and health. Again, you can get to where you want to go without that through what's called a guardianship proceeding. That's where, in the public court, witnesses are paraded in to testify as to your lack of capacity. That is not dignified, that is not respectful, that is not cheap. So you can avoid all of that with powers of attorney. You also need a will or a trust. Those allow your wishes to be carried out how you want them to be. Again, you don't need one, because the legislature in Springfield already has rules for if you don't have one. Okay, the sort of most well-known one maybe is that the Springfield rules say your spouse gets half and your kids get half. Well, I've never had someone come in and ask me, I want my stuff to go half to my spouse, half to my kids. Not at least with the spouse sitting there, right? So those rules, Springfield's rules, you are not going to like. And you get around that with a will or a trust. You need beneficiary designations on every kind of account that will handle them. Your trust can be your beneficiary. You can even do charitable beneficiaries. But if an account can handle a beneficiary, you need to put a beneficiary on it. Some bank accounts, you can put beneficiaries on. They don't always call them that. They call them PODs, or payables on death. So if that comes up and you talk to someone and they say, oh, you can't do that, just ask about payables on death. Or ask to talk to Susie, and she'll help you. There's also what's called a POLST form, P-O-L-S-T. That's a state-issued form that you fill out your wishes as it pertains to certain types of life-sustaining treatment or life support. It has to be recognized within the state. It will follow you as you're transferred from facility to facility, provider to provider. That's great. That is a catch-all form. You're much better off with a power of attorney for health care that's practical and trustworthy. But again, that's not always easy to find. So there are forms out there that can address that. So how much of this can you do on your own? Well, if you have legal capacity, all of it. If you don't have legal capacity, none of it. So how can we tell? And the courts, of course, have given a gray area answer on this, but once you've been in these situations, it's not clear. It's just not easy to tell. How many people have you dealt with where you ran into in the grocery store and you had no idea they were suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's? It's because those trained conversations, somebody who's declining can carry on without you having any idea. And it's happened to me several times. And I even am in the business of evaluating someone's capacity. So it's not always easy to tell. But the courts say a person has capacity if they have the ability to know and understand the objects of one's bounty and the nature and extent of one's property and form a plan. That really means, what do you have, who's in your family, and where do you want it to go? So it's not an insurmountable mountain to climb. I think that's fair, a fair standard. You have to know what you have. And, you know, technically someone with a super complex financial life could lose capacity sooner. Because it's harder to remember if you have 7 trusts and own 12 farms, but that's how it is. I mean, that means the consequences of a poor decision are much greater, financially speaking. So, the courts also say a person may be able to do so, to have legal capacity, despite an inability to transact ordinary business. That brings me to a big point. The diagnosis does not terminate your legal capacity or your dignity or any of those other things. It does not terminate your legal capacity. Losing a step does not terminate your legal capacity. The more simple your finances are, the more likely someone can maintain legal capacity into the early parts of the good days, bad days phase. So if you have 2 bank accounts and 2 kids, you know, you can remember that for a while. And you want it split 50-50. So, my big takeaways here are: get your legal documents and estate plan in place as soon as possible. Know what you have, know who owns it, and where it's going after you pass. So all the, you know, I've got something with Miller. I don't, it's something that helps for something when I get old. That doesn't cut it. And you say, okay, I know I have 3 policies, and we're doing this. Last is that diagnosis does not terminate your ability to conduct your affairs or sign legal documents. So it is not the ending of anything. And that's it.
I saw somebody starting to look up that Oscar music that they play, you know, so I was a little worried.
Yeah. Put the lawyers third, not good.
Thank you very much, Will. Obviously, as we mentioned earlier, your own estate plan in particular is unique to you, so make sure that you are going over that with your professional team. Okay, looking down the line, who is next? Jamie Long. Jamie Long is the founder and CEO of Golder Care Solutions in Moline. Jamie started Golder Care Solutions as a care management and advocacy agency for elder care issues. As a benefits advocate, he advises clients on their long-term care planning and decisions. He is a former elder care attorney. Jamie, thanks for being with us again. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Sam. Can you hear me? Oh, did I have it off? Can you hear me? All righty, sorry, thank you. Thank you for being here again, for those of you who are, and having us back, and for those of you who weren't here last time and are here, welcome and thank you for coming. Last time we talked about Golder Care's primary job and its mission is to bridge the gaps in helping you manage your own or your loved one's long-term care. So we're kind of human caulk guns. We fill those gaps. And because of that, Joan and I agreed that I was going to be the last one, since my presentation, it has nothing to do, but since my presentation is kind of, let's see what everybody else says first, and then we'll tailor it as needed on the spot. So I'll go 7.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, let me skip you. That's perfect. Thank you. Caulk gun. I like that. Very good. Okay. Let's move on then. Next. Beth McFalls is a local CPA. She is currently the owner of McFalls, Burge & Associates, a sterling accounting firm that has been around since 1996. She is CGH Health Foundation trustee, treasurer of Twin Cities Sunrise Rotary, member of the Illinois CPA Society, and American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. When she isn't working, she enjoys spending time hiking, biking, and following her children's sports with her husband, Brad. So, thank you.
Thank you. I get to talk about everyone's favorite subject, taxes. So as some of you in here might know, medical bills can add up quickly. But there are some opportunities to help reduce taxes for care of a spouse or a dependent. So besides a spouse, you might be able to claim a relative as a dependent if they make less than $4,300 a year and live with you more than 6 months out of the year. If they're only on Social Security and that's it, that wouldn't be considered taxable. So there might be some opportunity there for you to claim a relative as a dependent, even on Social Security. So the first option would be to take these expenses as an itemized deduction. So itemized deductions over the last couple of years have significantly changed. They used to be a lot lower. Now they are, for 2022, if you're single, it's $12,950, and if you're married filing joint, $25,900. And then if you're 65 and older, you also get an additional $1,400. So that high of standard deduction has caused a lot of individuals to not actually be able to take their medical as an itemized deduction any longer. So besides these high standard deductions that are helping individuals out, in the itemized deductions, there's also a cap of for medical. You can only deduct 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. So the 7.5% is not deductible, so you have to go above that in order for $1 of that to be deductible. So then, on top of that, you have to be able to go above your standard deduction. So you'd be talking about quite a bit of medical bills you'd have to reach in order for really them to be deductible on your tax return for 2022. I don't know if the standard deductions will eventually go down, but they're about double what they were, I think, like 5-6 years ago. So while these higher standard deductions can help you out, I can see a lot of frustrated clients coming into me and having all of these medical bills and shocked that none of them actually are helping them out by reducing their tax liabilities. So one option you might want, if you have a tax preparer, you might, before you calculate all of these and have, a nice booklet binder full of your medical bills and stuff, you might even want to ask them, hey, how much do I even have to spend in order for any of these to be deductible? Because it can be a lot of work gathering all that information, and the majority of time, a lot of them can't even be used. So, but if you are able to reach that amount, you might be able to deduct medical expenses for the taxes that you pay for yourself, spouse, dependents. So these can include medical fees, doctor visits, hospital services, prescriptions, some long-term care and nursing services, and insurance premiums, to name a few of those items that you can potentially deduct. There's a publication 502 on the IRS website, and that gives a whole list of things that are eligible and not eligible to be deducted for this itemized deduction. So really that is the only option for ways to be able to deduct medical expenses if you're retired and you're not actively working with like no W-2 wages or what they call earned income, which earned income could be if you're a farmer or if you own a Schedule C business, that type of a thing, that would be considered earned income. So for individuals that work and take care of their spouse or another dependent, like a parent, you might be able to have, there's maybe a few other options that you can take advantage of. So the key here is you must be working or seeking work in order for these next couple of items to be available to you. So your employer, they might offer a child independent flexible spending account, an FSA, but it's just like, you know, if you were going to pay for child care for your child, there's credits related to that. This is for dependent care. So it works very similar to the child care. So to qualify for this, you have to be caring for your spouse or a relative who is physically or mentally incapable of self-care and lives in your home. So for 2022, the IRS capped this at $5,000 that you would be able to give. So your employer would set up this fund, and you would be able to take money out of your paycheck, and it goes to this fund. And then from there, usually they give you a debit card type of a thing that you can use to offset that balance that is being taken out of your paycheck. So if a couple is married and filing jointly, both the employee and their spouse must be either working or looking for work. This requirement is waived when the spouse is disabled physically or mentally and lives with the employee a minimum of 6 months each year. So again, this reduces your W-2 wages and your Social Security wages, that type of a thing. So if your employer offers this and you have these types of medical bills, it could save around $1,100 to $1,500 a year by contributing $5,000 into this fund. So this is an annual amount, so you generally lose it if you don't use it. So you do want to be careful how much you contribute in there. You want to make sure that, you know, you're contributing, or, you know, there's different limits. You don't have to give the whole $5,000. So if you only have out of pocket of $1,000, you might want to add that up before giving to this type of a fund. So eligible expenses here would be adult senior daycare centers, elder care while you're at work in your home, or while they're at someone else's home, and then transportation by the care provider. So I oftentimes see people not taking advantage of this, and to me, if you have these types of expenses, really it's a very good thing to look into with your employer. So if your employer doesn't offer this type of account, then you might be eligible to use expenses on something called a dependent care credit, and that's on your tax return. There's no need to sign up for anything, and this can be used in along with a flexible spending account if you have enough expenses to be able to use both. So if you paid someone to care for a dependent, so you could work or look for work, you may be able to reduce your tax by claiming this dependent care credit on your federal income tax return. The credit is a percentage of the amount of work-related dependent care expenses you pay to a care provider. So the expenses would only qualify if you were working during that period of time or looking for work. So the credit can be up to 50% of your qualifying expenses depending on your income. So that person would need to live with you during the year for 6 months or more, and then you would have to have a job, earned income type of a situation. So these are all good options to potentially save on taxes. It's always good to have a conversation with your tax preparer. If you have medical expenses, to maybe see what options are available to you. And it changes from year to year. All of these things fluctuate, so.
Perfect, thank you so much. Taxes, fun stuff. All right, that brings us to Susie. Almost forgot my bio here, Susie. A second, we'll find you. Should have been more prepared. Susie Perino is the market president for Sauk Valley Bank in Rock Falls. She's responsible for leading and administrating the growth and directions of programs and services provided in the Rock Falls market area, representing the Sauk Valley Bank culture. Susie has 35 years banking experience, including leadership, business, and retail banking and marketing. She is very compassionate in giving back to the communities where she lives and services, and is a CGH Health Foundation trustee and an active member of several other local organizations, and also the Illinois Bankers Women in Banking. Susie.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here tonight. I too have the situation now, my parents are getting to the age that time for me to start thinking about all this. So I attended the last session and then planning on attending all 3 sessions, and then Joan asked me if I would speak. So with the banking experience that I have, I would like to share. I did have a handout there, and I just have some different topics I thought I would touch on. And I know that Veronica, talked about the opportunity, so has that in there. So there's different bank account ownerships, and one that we strongly suggest to almost everyone opening a bank account is a joint with rider survivorship. A joint ownership with rider survivorship is a general approach, that we use with aging parents and their children. The most common reason the parents add a child at this time to the joint account as a joint account holder is to help with their day-to-day management of their account. This type of ownership allows the joint owner complete access and rights to the funds of the account. If seeking to remove a joint owner from a personal account for any reason, the account must be closed and a new account is opened. So they have to give it a lot of thought to who they want that joint account owner to be. It can be closed, absolutely. However, when you have different transactions coming through the account, sometimes the time that it takes to change. So again, we always recommend to give that a lot of thought before making that decision. If the joint owner is deceased, the account would not need to be closed. Otherwise, in all other circumstances, it would need to be, we do not want the joint owner to have access to the account number, the checks, or any other access devices that are associated with that account. When one joint account owner dies, the surviving owner automatically takes ownership of all funds in the account. And as Will mentioned, the funds pass to the surviving account owner outside of the estate, so the right of survivorship controls over any terms in the descendant's will. Authorized signer. We can't always, we encourage joint. However, there are some that do not want to have the joint ownership. So an authorized signer. Many people choose to have an authorized signer in case of an emergency or for matters of convenience. Older adults often choose to add authorized signers to help them manage their finances in the event of an illness or disability. The authorized signer is authorized to perform the day-to-day activities on a checking account, including writing checks, performing transfers, checking balances, and depositing funds. If they are seeking to remove that authorized signer, the account, again, must be closed, okay, and then reopen a new one. The only time that it would not is if the authorized signer was deceased. Authorized signers have no rights to the account assets upon death unless they are listed as the account beneficiary, as you had mentioned, like the POD. They could be the authorized signer, and they also can be listed as a beneficiary to the account, along with maybe other siblings. And authorized signers' privileges are only legit while the account is while the account owner is alive. The others are power of attorney, which we heard quite a bit about. Individuals may choose to select a power of attorney and, granting another person to make the decisions on their behalf. Once the power of attorney document is executed and accepted by the bank, the agent is authorized to act on behalf of the individual according to the powers that they have included in the power of attorney document. The power of attorney can be revoked at any time as long as the donor is mentally capable of making this decision and they notify the bank. Power of attorney ceases upon death of the account holder. So that's the different ownerships that I had, and as Will had mentioned, the POD, payable on death, and then you can select beneficiaries, and then you also can select the percentage. So if you have a son and a daughter, you will tell us 50% to each. They may do 60-40. There may be grandchildren involved also, but you can select payable on death, and we refer to it as POD on any of the checking, savings, certificate of deposits. Managing bank accounts. Okay, as they mentioned here Veronica, Mike, everyone will start the conversation early. Start an ongoing dialogue. You know, it can make it easier to understand the financial landscape and give you a better grasp of what your level of involvement may be. Make gradual changes. Increase your support little by little, and if needed, when talking with the individual. If you can take on the responsibility of writing checks, start by doing it together. This kind of gradual, sensitive approach gives them and you some time to get comfortable with the new arrangement. Will talked about this. Take inventory of any financial and legal documents that they may have. Make a list of individual financial organizations. Several times, I think Mike mentioned this too, we have people come in, they're wanting to know, did my mom have her account here? Just, you know, my uncle, and we cannot give any information out at all, okay? So it's, you know, very important to know what financial organizations or investments that they have. Account numbers, if you can get them, and place all this, places they store legal documents. If it's in a safe deposit box, is it a safe in their home? Double check that everything is still valid and up to date, and that all accounts are in good standing. Make sure any sensitive information is in a secure location. Simplifying financial tasks. Once everything is organized, take a closer look at the individual's account and consider setting up direct deposits and automatic payments, if they don't already have those, to ensure the deposits reach the account and that the bills are paid on time. Communicate, and Veronica mentioned this, communicate and document your moves, but keep the individual informed and include them with what is going on. Okay, process to manage account and transactions. There are a few different ways you can manage account transactions for an individual. Online banking, everything's going electronic. Online banking access. Review the account. You can review their account at any time. You can access monthly statements. Typically, electronic statements are saved for 18 months, so you can go back and review. Monthly statements could be mailed physically to the individual and also the caregiver or the joint owner, you know, if you have a different address. Or like Veronica said, you may want to have, you know, change the mailing address to you, the caregiver, or the child. Alert messages can be put on account to be received in a text or email. They're set up through online banking. You can set it for like incoming ACH credit or debit. And I'll tell everyone, I set mine up, and at 3 a.m. I got a text message that I had an ACH. Scared me because my phone was right beside my bed. So I changed that. I changed that to an email. I now have an email. Yes. So it's very, I learned the hard way.
This is the voice of experience.
Yes, of the experience. My kids still call me Mother Hen, even though they're all adults and have their own children. I have my phone beside me every night. Balance limits. You can set an alert if the balance goes below a specific amount, and also if it goes above an amount, okay? If the account is overdrawn, you can receive an alert. Specific item. If you're waiting to see if a specific item is cleared or you're waiting for one to come in, you can also set the alert message for that. Managing passwords. These are just some helpful tips that we try to give all those that are setting up their passwords through the bank or online banking. Don't use the same password. It's recommended not to use the same password on multiple forms. Recommends not using names, birthdays, anniversaries, particularly your parents, siblings, partners, or pets. These are easy to learn and find out. Avoid letting your computer remember passwords. It will ask you, would you like to save your password? Recommend avoiding that. Be alert for outside sources asking for passwords. Encourage individuals to never give passwords on the computer or over the phone. Try to change your passwords every few months to ensure safety. I know it's a hassle. I agree, I'm there. But it's better to be safe than sorry. Securely store your passwords. Write them down on paper. I know that a lot of them, some you can do a password in your phone. However, I have always been told, write them down, store them in a safe place with sensitive documents. Caregivers should also, or children should also have a copy stored in a secure place. Okay, ensuring ethical caregivers. This is what I have seen the most with my experience in banking. Very sad. Red flags. There's a lot of red flags, and I'll share a few of the common signs that showing that a loved one may be financially exploited. Missing money, abrupt changes in spending or saving habits, convoluted explanations for financial activity, frequent ATM use, large unexplained bank withdrawals, sudden gift giving, where it's getting excessive. A money manager or other person intercepts visitors or calls and doesn't let the loved one speak for themselves. Mood changes. Feelings and emotion remain intact long after words have lost their meaning. And we sometimes see people come in and we can tell by facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language that something's not right with that individual. All employees at Sauk Valley Bank are required to complete an elderly abuse course annually. We work with Lifescapes locally on financial and elderly abuse. Trust. Okay, according to the National Council on Aging, almost 90% of the financial abuse committed against older Americans is done by someone they know. More than ever, it is imperative for seniors to select a trustworthy person to properly manage their finances and their personal affairs. Individuals can look for qualities of a caregiver. There's just a few. Patience, one that'll take patience and talk with them. Attentiveness, they care about their finances, they care about them as an individual. Dependability, they say they're going to be there at this time, they take them to do this if they do show up on time. Trustworthiness. That's a tough one because we do feel that we can trust people, and sometimes, as we know, that turns out that we can't. If a caregiver is not a family member, it may be preferred to use a local agency who screens applicants versus a private caregiver that you know you may get a name from someone. Okay, the next, use of credit cards and debit cards. Credit cards have limits, and having limits per user, and if needed, you can decrease the limits, okay? If an individual is paying an annual, you may see they're paying an annual fee and to have all these different perks and bonuses, and they really don't use that, you can switch to a different card with no annual fee. We did have an individual that could see their parents' credit card bill just rising, and it didn't happen to be the parent that was making those charges. So if the account is no longer needed by an individual and the balance can be paid to zero and they don't need that card, it could be closed, and an individual can use a debit card, and it can be used as a credit or a debit. Because sometimes if you're renting a car or going to stay at a hotel, you still need a credit card, and the debit card, it can be used. You just say, rather than saying debit, you say credit, okay? Debit cards, daily limits can be set on debit cards for ATM withdrawals and point-of-sale purchases. You can set a debit card to have no ATM activity if the individual is having excessive ATM withdrawals. You can have it to zero. You can set it to a permanent $100 per day, but it is a daily limit. And do the same with the point-of-sale purchase. It can be it can be a small amount so that you know it's on, $100, but again, it's a daily limit. So I just recommend, if you are the caregiver or the child, you look at that account, because I recommend that to all of our customers. A minimum of monthly, but I recommend weekly, and some people will do it daily. And then outstanding loans. I'm just going to touch on that briefly. That's really, honestly, a case-by-case with each event. In most cases, the individual is responsible for any debt that they hold at a financial institution, and the caregiver will communicate with the financial institution on their behalf if the individual becomes incapacitated. The financial institution more than likely will work with the caregiver, and every situation, may be unique. If the customer is still living in the home but can no longer take care of themselves, the financial institution, we could reach out to like our local senior center attorneys to seek assistance in possibly finding an advocate for the individual. But again, it's really a case by case when it comes to the loan side, I should say. That's my banking topics for all of you.
Thank you, Susie. Nick LaRue is a financial advisor with Edward Jones in Sterling. He started with the firm in 2008. He attended SIU Carbondale and received his bachelor's degree in finance while simultaneously serving 6 years in the Illinois Air National Guard as a medic. He is a limited partner with Edward Jones and provides training to new financial advisors. Nick is very involved in Kiwanis, active in Sterling Main Street, Sterling Rotary, American Legion, and the CGH Health Foundation Plan Giving Committee. He and his wife Jennifer are the parents of one daughter, Olivia. Nick.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
Well, Beth was going to talk about the favorite topic of taxes. The second favorite topic might be investments right now, given this year's performance. However, the motto in our office is we want to plan plans, not really plan outcomes necessarily. So first off, I want to just compliment everyone here this evening, getting more information and expertise from the panel up here about how we can be better caregivers, or again, put a plan in place sooner rather than later. But we're privileged to partner with a lot of families in the area, and primarily our focus is on helping them prepare for retirement, maybe live in retirement comfortably, pay for an education for a child or grandchild. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we help folks prepare for the unexpected and also help them plan their estate or inheritance. But before I do, I just want to survey the crowd. How many of you, or like me, have a safety deposit at the box or a firebox for secure papers in your basement, or maybe a gun safe like me where you keep important items? Anybody got any of that going on there? Okay. Thinking about the ones that you're caring for, that's also probably likely as well. Who knows where the combination is? Who knows where the key is? Okay. Not as many hands, but, so again, I think we've heard.
You don't just have it on the box?
Yeah. On the backside of my 300-pound gun case, you can get to it. But the point is, I think we've heard it before, start that conversation earlier. Shout out to the personal financial organizer here. It doesn't have to be this fancy, but what I will credit these is that there's a lot in there, and it gets you thinking. It gets you thinking about that safe deposit box. Those old policies, those dividend checks that come in from an insurance company because you had a life insurance policy with them years ago, and then they became a publicly traded stock, and you get $2 a quarter in dividends. I know the accountants love getting all those 1099s. So organizing that. As a financial advisor, we always say we want to be your financial quarterback, and I feel it's appropriate me down here at the end because I want to communicate with your tax preparer. I want to know when you've got life event updates because that may be an introduction. We need to get you back with your attorney. Oftentimes, we are in communication with our clients more often than maybe the tax professional once a year. The attorney, oftentimes, it's when you have a life event, but then sometimes life events don't resonate as much in those later years that you do need to be talking to your attorney again. So we really stress that open and honest dialogue with our clients. We always say, again, you don't have to have all your investments with your financial advisor, but we at least want to know where they're located. So that should be the same when you're talking with your family or those that you're caring for. Planning ahead. Preparing for the unexpected. When it comes to investments, what we've learned over the years is cash flow trumps investment returns. Another way for saying that is, what are you doing to align your life savings towards your goals? And, you know, at our firm, we take the approach of you need to have different buckets of money, so to speak. You know, bucket number one needs to be that true emergency cash. What can you get your hands on in the checkbook today to write that check for care? You know, we recommend 9 to 12 months in living expenses. And forecasting forward, what might that look like? We heard a little bit about the elimination period. You know, what do you have to pay out of your own pocket if we're looking ahead at somebody's care starting to diminish and thinking, okay, next year this time we're going to have to, you know, be footing a bigger bill. So that's bucket number one. Bucket number two is more that intermediate term. You know, what do you have for your investments and your savings that might be available over the next year to 5 years? You know, typically those are certificates of deposits, maybe treasury bonds, things like that that give you a high degree of certainty. Because if anything, in 2020 and now this year, you know, you don't want to be having to tap into your last bucket, number three, your long-term investments, things that are going to give you that growth potential over a meaningful period of time. And that bucket also needs to maybe be there for that dementia patient that might be in a facility for 7, 8, 9 years. So you need to have some of your monies potentially growing for that. During, again, these last few years and this year, again, you're not having to be forced to sell good investments while they're down. And on that last bucket, another quick survey, you know, who paid more for their last vehicle than they did their first home 30, 40 years ago? All right, so a lot of hands going up. Similar types of planning that you can do. Again, I won't beat the inflation bucket there. But that other bucket I want to compliment Mike, I kind of forgotten about. What you said there is if you have these types of insurance policies, again, that could be a cash flow income that, again, you don't have to quickly exhaust the short-term bucket, the intermediate term, and again, the longer-term bucket there. So the second topic here, planning your estate. Again, it's really more than just money. It's what's important to you and how you want it handled when you can no longer make those decisions. I was talking to my office assistant here this morning, planning well in advance of tonight's program. I said, you know, let's think back over the last year. Where have we experienced, you know, hiccups, we call them, with clients, and oftentimes a child coming in to help with their financial matters. And I'm just going to give a couple examples here, and these have all been actually since February once we looked at them. Speaking about bank accounts, we had the daughter come in, and she informed us that mom had been in the hospital and then was in a rehab facility. And the daughter had shared with us that she often had asked her mother, you know, am I on your accounts to make sure I can take care of you if something happens? Yes, you're on my accounts. You're on the account at the bank. Okay. As Susie explained there, daughter walked into the bank, needing to get some money out, pay some bills. Daughter was on the account as a POD. So again, in a time where mom's in the facility, you know, she's having to run around in an unsettled, you know, emotional state to do all this paperwork shuffle. There's a phrase in our work: if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So we really stress getting those important documents on file there. Another situation we had this year, a gentleman dealing with his wife, cancer for many years, and also was one that had come into the office because he had received some of these dividend checks from a new company and didn't recognize the name. Well, the stocks had gone through a reorganization. Well, it was in the wife's name, and they had set up kind of their buckets of money in her account, their account, and their retirement accounts. And come to find out, they had yet to finalize their will. In fact, they had gone through the estate planning process when the client and his daughter, power of attorney, were in the office. They called the attorney to just kind of confirm if they could get a copy on file for our office. They never completed the final step of signing and notarizing. So thankfully, the attorney's office had the historical documents there. It was 6 or 7 years old. So they said, let's come in and review everything again. So that's critical to, again, get it done, but then also, as we've talked about, get it to the appropriate financial institutions to get it on file. And then lastly, I heard beneficiaries. That's important, especially with life insurance policies. We had one, and the client admittedly, it wasn't in our office, someone in Florida, the client, and they said, you know, it's just a rinky-dink policy, we kind of forgot about it, we did some things years ago, but the beneficiary of the life insurance policy was the individual's estate. So then it had to go through this probate process in Florida. So just little hiccups that if you've got a binder and you're having those conversations that I think you can avoid. Speaking of financial gaps and communication gaps, I'll just leave you with this. You know, that difference between expectation and reality, that gap in the middle, that's frustration, right? So I think it starts with communication on all parties. So I'm going to turn it over here to...
I like that. To our caulk gun.
Yeah.
To our caulk gun. Jamie's going to close us here tonight, and then we know it is running late, so after Jamie's presentation, you are free to leave, certainly. If we have some questions, I'm sure some of us on the panel would be happy to stick around. So Jamie, go ahead.
All right, thanks once again. I think you got some great information and some great presentations tonight. Am I right? I really do. As I say, what we do is we kind of serve, to some extent, as that quarterback that you're talking about when we're talking about long-term care issues and planning long-term care. We want to bridge those gaps in helping manage someone's long-term care. And that's where the caulk gun comes in. There's really not anything to particularly caulk tonight, kind of putting the whole thing together. When we're looking at long-term care, whether it's your own or whether you're a caregiver or a family member or a stakeholder for someone else, we're looking about how do we pay? And that's the subject of tonight's presentations, the financial aspects. I believe my wife, Gail, passed out a flyer that talks about 12 different ways to pay. We're not going to go into all of those, so Joan can relax. And there'll be hours and hours of education on some of that stuff, folks. But that gives you an idea of different ways to do it. We've talked about some of those tonight. We've talked about long-term care insurance, and we've talked about income and assets and Medicaid and veterans and all sorts of things. They all have their place, and they are all separate rule systems. So when you're looking at planning somebody's long-term care, you really need some specialization that bridges all those gaps to overlook or to oversee all of those conflicts. And that's where people get into trouble. Okay? We're not going to go into all of that tonight. I will tell you this much, and I think I mentioned it last time, not to be self-promoting, but Golder Care has, we had originally started what we called an Aging Solo Club. That has morphed into the Empowered Living Club. That's all of $10 a year. For those of you who have attended, we comp that out for free for everybody here for the next year. And one of the things we do is some more advanced education in this. So you've got good education tonight, and we've got a whole year's worth of educational materials that you may want. Right now we're doing a series on aging in place and how to stay home longer. It's perspectives on that. In October, it's about the issues of what we call compliance issues. So I want to hire, rather than hire an agency, I want to hire an individual to come in and help care for mom. Okay, well, what do we need to do compliance-wise? What do we need to do? We need to be able to do withholding. We need to maybe have a written contract We want to make sure that people aren't being paid under the table, so that we have questions of adult protective services, whether mom is being taken advantage of, or if we have to later apply for Medicaid, that there have been gifts, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a compliance piece, and we're going to spend an hour on that on, I believe, October 19th. We do those on the third Wednesday of the month. It's done by Zoom, and they are made available afterwards on demand. So if you're a member of the club, you can get that. And if you're interested, just contact us or see Gail or whatever. The November presentation is on, am I a caregiver or am I a family member? Okay? You'll hear home agencies say, you know, why don't you hire us to help you take care of mom? Do you want to be a caregiver, or would you like to be a daughter again? Okay? Because we all know it's usually the eldest daughter who gets stuck with the job. So those are just some pieces. So 12 ways to pay. When we're looking at trying to figure out how to pay for care, we want to bring care into the home. I can't care for myself, okay? Or mom can't care for herself, is what we usually say. What are we looking at? Well, number one, we usually look at what I call human resources, okay? We've got an example of it down at the other end of the table, don't we? We had a lot of family caregiving, a lot of what we call informal caregivers. That will go so far. That may cover it, but it may leave a gap at the end. People burn out, they need respite, et cetera, et cetera. They have jobs, they have lives, they have to take care of themselves. So human resources is only going to go so far, but we need to take that into account as a first step in how do we provide that care. It may be that there's nobody. As I said, we started out our club as with an aging solo academy, aging solo. So that was for people who didn't have kids, or they're estranged from them, or they're living across the country, they're home, they got a spouse, but the spouse has got dementia. So we may or we may not have human resources. The next thing we look at, number two, is private benefits. You've heard that talked about tonight. We've talked about long-term care insurance. That's one of the private benefits that some people have. Or they may have some kind of a benefit through their employment. So we heard on the tax side some potential employment benefits that could help. Okay, so that's the field of private benefits. If I have to pay to bring somebody else in, and I don't have it for free from family members or friends, and we see that a lot, then what are the private benefits? If I don't have enough private benefits, if I can't cover it with those two, we move on to number three. What kind of income do we have? And I think it was cash flow trumps investment returns. Cash flow income is very, very important. And if we have enough income, we can make it through, but the income sometimes is spoken for in multiple directions. So we look at the income aspects, and many benefits are income dependent, okay? If we don't have enough income, all right? If we don't have enough income, then we go number 4 to assets, okay? Do we have to start invading those buckets? Do we have to get into those bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera? So we look at the assets. Am I going to use assets to pay for long-term care? All right? Now, the rules that the government likes you to hear, okay, and that they insist that the agencies that they give grants to, they insist that they tell you only the front face. And that is, once you've spent mom or dad or yourself down to $2,000 in countable assets, then come see us and apply for Medicaid, okay? Now, there's multiple kinds of Medicaid and many different sets of rules. Medicaid in the home and community-based services. There is supportive living in Illinois, which is Medicaid for supportive living, or for assisted living. There's nursing home Medicaid, and they all have different rules. And then go across the river over to Clinton, and you're in completely different territory. So, as I say, we look at the mantra is spend down to $2,000 and then come see us. But a lot of times people want to preserve some assets, okay? So they may want to go, we look at human resources, we look at private benefits, we look at income, and we look at assets. And then we go to public benefits, like Medicaid or quasi-public benefits like VA. And as I believe what Sam said, that, you know, VA is not going to fill the gaps. It's a limited measure. But we look at public benefits. And so the system is meant so that we look at public benefits last. You will find, and we help people with that all the time, but you will find that some people, I think the question was, what does money mean to you? Okay? And when we're talking about long-term care, what does money mean to you? And what does having some money available mean to you? Do you spend down to the $2,000 willy-nilly, what we call an organic spend out? At that point, you've got the $2,000 left, and once mom is on Medicaid, she gets $30 a month for her personal needs allowance. That means that mom may go without, or you may be contributing money for that. So 2 reasons that people like to get public benefits to come in before they have exhausted all of their assets are supplemental needs, okay? If I spend everything down and I've got poor eyesight and I want that big screen TV, Medicaid ain't gonna give it to me, okay? We better plan ahead, and we better have a way to access money to do that. Preferably my own money, rather than becoming a burden to family members. Now, Gail and I have no children of our own, and our niece Naomi works with us, and she is our next in line. Our favorite way of goading Naomi is to say, gosh, we hope we live long enough to be a burden on you. But we don't want to take away from Naomi's assets. We don't want her to become responsible for paying for us. So those are 2 reasons why we may not want to spend down fully in the organic way, okay? Another thing is, I have a spouse. You see her sitting there. If I go on to Medicaid and she has to spend down, she may be living in poverty in the community, okay? I may want to say, I want the care that I need, but I want to make sure that her standard of living and her quality of life are not diminished. So that's another reason. Another thing may be, sometimes it's hard to get me in somewhere, okay? I want to have some monies legally put aside so that we can pay privately to prime the pump, so that I can get access to where I want to be, all righty? And then there's the last one. Some people say, you know, I realize it's my money. We always tell people, it's mom's money. If there's a dime left when she's gone, it's a dime more than you are legally entitled to expect. That having been said, mom may say, sometimes they do, and that is, I'm willing to, I know it's my money, I'm willing to spend it on me, but damn it, there is a certain level of dignity. I want to be able to leave a little something to my kids. Those are reasons why we sometimes reverse the assets and the public benefits and try to get public benefits eligibility earlier, okay? I will tell you 2 things. I will tell you that there is a new development in this, both for Medicaid purposes and for tax purposes, and it's called a Quadro strategy, okay? Many of you maybe have heard of or have experienced Quadros. A Quadro is QDRO, Qualified Domestic Relations Order. They are typically used with regard to a divorce in which one or both of the parties have pension plans. And it is how do you split those pension plans, okay? The pension plans are governed by ERISA. They are federally regulated, and the state courts don't have full jurisdiction. And so as a result, you have to use a Quadro to transfer pension plans. You can transfer a 401k, not an IRA. Is that right? Not an IRA, but you can transfer, my Alzheimer's was kicking in, I'm sorry. You can transfer a 401k with that. And one of the problems that we have in a lot of this planning, and in a lot of tax planning with individuals, so this comes right along the whole line here, is we have one spouse who has a large amount of investments, but it's all held in a 401k, or most of it is. And that's the spouse that needs the care, and that's the spouse that needs maybe some kind of benefits or whatever. So we want to be able to transfer that asset to the other spouse, okay? You can't do that without a quadro, okay? And most people don't want to get a divorce, and in fact, we tell people, don't get a divorce. In 30, 40 years of doing this work, I have recommended a divorce, maybe the fingers on one hand, okay? Maybe a second, but hardly ever. And there is a procedure that is available now, a quadro strategy that allows us to have an agreement between the parties, and they can get a quadro without getting a divorce, okay? This is brand new in Illinois. It has fairly brand new in Iowa. We then ran into problems in Iowa City. We've got it on appeal out there. I'm working with, I'm not a lawyer at this point in my life, but I'm working with 2 law firms out there. And this is something that's coming about nationally. So you might have, it could be used outside of long-term care. You might have a fellow who's turning 72, he's got a big 401k, he's going to have required minimum distributions and a lot of taxes. His spouse is 62, 10 years until RMDs. So we transfer it from the older spouse to the younger, and there's a lot of big tax savings there. That has nothing to do with really tonight's piece, but that's a brand new piece. If you're interested in that, we'll be doing informational stuff on that too, because it is literally pretty much brand new. And the other thing that I want to tell you is we've been talking about where to store your legal documents. There are online services. The oldest and best known is something called DocuBank, okay? You can get DocuBank, I think it's about $55 a year, and they started out to hold your medical documents, your healthcare power of attorney, your living will, your pulse, whatever you wanted to have in it. And it's available then. Who's got the combo? You have a card right in your wallet, and you have a sticker on your driver's license. And anytime you go to the provider, they can get the documents from DocuBank, okay? It's about $55 a year. It's great. However, if you do decide to take us up on our offer in joining the club, it's available to club members for $18 a year, okay? So I said, even if you were paying the $10 fee dues a year, you'd still be saving big money. It's just a thing that we make available. But I strongly do recommend it, even though it may sound self-serving. It is a huge benefit to our members and to the community. You don't have to be aged. Anybody who's 18 or over and is an American citizen can, or a lawful presence here can get it. That's the end of my presentation. I think we're all open to questions right now. What do you want to do, John?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing. Yeah, so thank you so much again for joining us tonight. We hope you're able to pick up on a few things. There's a lot that was said here today, so I think it's very common for head nods to turn into head shakes. Hopefully you've been able to jot down what questions to ask and who to ask them of. With that being said, if anyone needs to leave, I know it's going on 7:30, but if there are any questions, we would be happy to take them from the crowd. Does anyone have anything specifically for anyone on the panel?
Speaking on the notebook, I didn't bring them. I should have. At our office, 801 First Avenue, we have a memorial guide. It's like a 4-page foldout, okay? You can keep all the information in there, where your policy's at, and everything. If anybody wants one, stop by the office. I'll have them out front. You don't need to see me. You don't need to have a sales presentation. Just stop and pick one out, okay?
Don't come see me. So thank you again for coming, and be sure to come to our next series in November.